All right. Hello, Brian. Hello, Toby.
Good morning, Hayley. Good morning, Toby, and thank you for joining us. Hayley, it's my great pleasure to introduce a new friend who I met on this spiritual search of mine and discovered a fellow traveler who's prolific writer. He's a former monk, stayed in much longer than I did. He is a protege, a colleague, a student of Joseph Campbell. He's an authority on comparative religions. He's an award-winning author, and the book that I'm reading right now of Toby's is called Gay Perspective, and I'm just, my heart just keeps jumping in recognition of a truth that I've come across on my own, and having a brother say the same thing really is very affirming. I think I mentioned psychotherapist, book editor, magazine editor, and an amazing guy who I'm excited about having join us in this conversation, as is he, which is fun. You know, that Toby's watched our conversations and is excited about being with us. So Toby, thank you so much for being in the world and being with us today.
Oh, well, you're certainly welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, your writing, you make lots of references to other people's writings, and you're so, you're really well read, and I admire that. But you told me once that you had you identified with the title of this program that Hayley and I do, called "Are You Happy Without the Movie?" Tell your own story. Tell your own story about that.
Well, yes, I thought that really a curious title when you invited me on to be on the blog, and it just speaks so directly to one of my experiences of my life. My first really successful book was a science fiction novel called Secret Matter. And I'd like to tell a little about the novel, but way back early on, somebody commented to me, "Oh, this would make a good movie." And as they were just starting to do gay movies at the time, I thought, "Oh, this is perfect. And I even worked for a little while with the screenwriter, but then he was a sort of a flaky fellow and disappeared, and so nothing came of that. And I don't know, I've just accepted this is what's happened. But the whole idea of a movie of Secret Matter has always been on my mind, and suddenly your blog comes up with, "Are you happy without the movie?" And it's like, well, am I? Can I wanted that movie.
But yeah, so the question is, you're perfectly happy even if it doesn't happen.
Yes, that one has to be happy with what happens, because if you're always expecting something or wanting something else to happen, then what happens? Well, you're always unhappy.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, that was one of the big ideas in EST. Remember EST?
I do.
Werner Erhard's seminar training. That was very important for me, for all that EST had stuff around it and people make jokes about it. There were some very wise ideas.
The biggest which was what? What's the principle?
Well, I would say the one that I say to myself daily still is, and it's the source of the joke about going to the bathroom. One of the little rules was keep your souls in the room, follow instructions, and take what you get. And there was a pun on keep your souls in the room, meaning the soles of your shoes, but that also meant keep your consciousness here as opposed to thinking about somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So it's be present, see what the instructions are coming from your experience, follow instructions, and take what you get.
Hayley?
Is that take what you get or take what you can?
Well, it was take what you get. Get was one of the big words in EST. to get it was to have this sort of enlightenment experience, or to understand something by realization, to get it, you know. And this was in the 1970s when getting it was, do we still use that phrase? I guess we still do,
I
but
think
not
it's still
quite.
relevant.
Yeah, but grok was a similar word. Remember grok from Stranger in a Strange Land? There was a very popular sci-fi novel. I want to segue back here to science fiction, because I want to talk about secret matter a little bit. And I think that science fiction is one of the genres. It's sort of, you know, in literary circles, it's dismissed as genre fiction and frivolous and not serious literature. Although there's some very serious literature in the science fiction canon, as they call it. But science fiction allowed a writer to create a kind of universe with different rules. You could, if you explained it correctly and kept consistent about the new rules you made, you could create other societies, other worlds, so that you could pose questions differently. One of the great books in that regard that dealt with gay-like issues was Ursula Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness, which set up a world in which, through genetic engineering, people had been modified so that while people were male and female, every month or two, you would go into a state called Kimmer, where you would become sexually aroused and sexually active. And depending on who you connected with, one person would become the male and one would become the female, in the sense of who would father a child. And it could change depending on, well, that's a very gay-like thing, in the sense of top and bottom being versatile. It was a way that Ursula Le Guin, actually in a very heterosexual context, but could talk about those kind of issues.
What did you call such people? What did she call them? That they could change, you know, once. I'm just wondering whether we should add their initial to our acronym, and do they have a flag? Should we add the flag or ever expanding flag?
And now you're quite, the planet was called Winter because it was always cold. And the reason they got this, they were designed with this system of sex, was because it was the adversity of the cold. You could, you know, you got off your 2 weeks when you were in this state of Kimmer, but the rest of the time you stayed on purpose and worked and weren't distracted by sex because the environment was so difficult.
Toby, did Joseph Campbell share your interest in science fiction?
I don't know. I would say not exactly. I don't think he would have. He certainly wasn't reading modern science fiction. You know, because he got associated with Star Wars, because what's his name?
George Lucas.
George Lucas got interested in Campbell and sort of attributes the story in Star Wars to Campbell's hero journey. Mm-hmm. Campbell now gets associated with Star Wars. So there's a whole science fiction thing that's ended up laid on top of him, which he probably wouldn't have understood much.
Yes.
Just to explain, you know, let me say that I was I had read Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces when I was in college, at a time that I was just dealing with coming out and realizing I was gay, and but was also still involved with Catholic religious life. And so all of this about the hero was, and Campbell's analysis of religion was very salient to my personal life and my religious life and my spiritual life. And then when a few years later, I got to California. I was living in San Francisco as a student of comparative religion at the California Institute of Asian Studies, now called California Institute of Integral Studies. So I saw on the bulletin board that Campbell was giving a talk at a place in Ukiah, about 150 miles north of San Francisco. And I signed up and applied for a work scholarship. So was asked to come up a day early to help clean the building, which was an old ranch house out in the a beautiful spot up in the hills above Mendocino. And Campbell arrived early too. And so I got to meet him personally and sort of hit it off with him. He liked young male fans, not sexually. I'm not putting that on it, but he taught at a girls' college. So all of his students were women. He was a heterosexual man, married to a woman who was a dancer, a New York choreographer, and they didn't have children, probably because she didn't want to ruin her body. Although I don't know, I have no idea why they didn't have children, other than that they say in their writings that they chose not to have children and to let their creation, their creative work be their spiritual children. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Joseph Campbell didn't have a son, and coming out of old-time Irish Catholic culture, he should have had a son who'd carry on his name and all that. And he didn't. So young men who'd be like sons flattered him, and he liked that. And I was one of those guys, and ended up working on the crew that worked at his seminars in Northern California for about 10 years. So I heard him lots of times, and he and I corresponded. And I certainly was not a close friend at all, but I was a friend, and I knew him personally, and we exchanged Christmas cards occasionally, that kind of thing.
Hayley, was Joseph Campbell was huge in my spiritual journey. Ray and I listened to Bill Moyer's interview, 6-part interview with him over and over and over again. We just played tape 1 through 6, started back with 1 when we were doing cross-country trips. Was he big in your life, Hayley?
Yes. So It was actually his writing that really validated how I felt. And it came to me in a very interesting way. My spiritual journey was very Buddhist focused. And I was sitting at work one time, and one of the people that worked with me came up and was like, "Have you read Joseph Campbell?" And I was like, "Don't know him. No." And he was like, "Read this book." And that book to this day was sort of the spark that created where I am today. So Joseph Campbell is incredibly impactful in my life. And I think, not just in my life, I think anybody that is questioning where they came from or what all of this means, he writes and he explains it in such a way that you can get it.
Toby, you said definitively.
I want to just reflect off what Hayley said about, because sure. I mentioned that I had watched your earlier podcast from 2 weeks ago, and you tell the story about filling out the form and being asked your religion and answering all of them, which the person then immediately took as, "Oh, you're an atheist." Right. Joseph Campbell had a wonderful story that he said he was lecturing one night, and he'd been explaining all about the hero journey and how the different gods in the world all display the same pattern, and that this is the basis of all myth. And at the end of during the question and answer session, a rather stern lady stood up and said, Mr. Campbell, I've been listening to you all night, and well, I think you're an atheist. And Campbell said that he walked to the front of the stage and he said, Madam, anyone who believes in as many gods as I do can hardly be called an atheist.
Toby, you said pretty definitively a minute ago that Joseph Campbell was heterosexual. And in your book, Gay Perspective, one of the things that I resonated so much with was you talking about gay people, gay men having the ability to tap the feminine and see the world in a way that most straight men don't. I wonder about. I know that Joseph Campbell was in a heterosexual marriage, and it's not. There's no way to do anything but speculate on his sexual orientation. But when I was thinking about it, I don't expect a straight man to say, follow your bliss. There's a part of me that feels that Joseph Campbell was very in touch with his feminine, and that in order to be in touch with his feminine in such a way, there had to be some part of him that was homosexual, that was at least sexually fluid. What do you say about that?
Well, let me say, because I actually knew him, I'm careful to not speculate wildly about things I don't know, because it makes it sound like maybe I know something that I don't.
Right.
I understand the point you make and sort of agree with you. Some of that can be simply explained by saying, well, he was a Jungian. So he would have been interested in finding his anima, and he would have been interested in understanding those things.
And then
it's also true that he lived at on the corner of Waverly and Gay Street. He lived on the 17th floor or the 13th floor, I forget now. And there was one window of the apartment was kept with a blind over it. The other window was open so that he could look out on the river, and that looked down on Sheridan Square. He must have been looking out that window the night of the Stonewall riots.
Yes.
He never talks about that, and that he doesn't talk about it is interesting in itself.
Yes. I had in mind Mr. Rogers, who was married, but people are now able to say, his friends were able to say, if he had been able to, that he was a sexually fluid person, that he could just as easily have been in a gay relationship. And the only reason that I bring it up, it's not that, great, we got another one in our camp. It's just that I resonate so much with what you talk about in terms of a gay sensibility. And you say, well, he was Jungian. Well, what kind of man is attracted to Jung to begin with?
I wanted to ask a question to that, Brian.
Yes.
For a man to be balanced and for a woman to be balanced with their feminine and masculine side, does that mean that they're gay?
No, I would say, if you're talking about balance, I would say that they're fluid. We put labels on gay, straight, but we're talking about orientation, behavior, and identity. Joseph Campbell may have had a straight identity and he may have behaved in a straight way, but what's his orientation? What did he think about privately? So when you talk about, being in touch with your masculine and feminine, which I think is what we're called by nature to be, I think that allows for openness to experience tenderness and intimacy with somebody of both genders. Right. Toby, what do you think about that?
Well, I think things have changed dramatically in the past few decades as a result of gay liberation. And by making gayness public, we've kind of created a polarization that hadn't existed before that, when homosexuality was secret. So people are more like, the bisexuals now have to actually choose which side they're on.
Mm.
And I think, isn't it Freud says everybody's really bisexual, but somewhere along the line you get directed one way or the other. I don't think it's quite that fluid myself, but there are a set of people who are sort of bisexual. And in the old days, it was much easier to choose to be straight, since you had that as an option. And you didn't even think about the other because it simply wasn't an option. For somebody growing up in Campbell's time, the idea of being a homosexual was just beyond the pale. And you wouldn't go there if you didn't have to. Some of us had to because we weren't bisexual.
Right.
A few years ago, this term metrosexual got popular.
Mhm.
I have a little article on my website saying perhaps the better word would be mesosexual, meaning kind of in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And it has turned out now, when I look at the Google tracking on my website, the word mesosexual, which I didn't know anyone else in the world uses, but that is the most common search term that brings up my website.
No
People
kidding.
searching for mesosexual.
Wow. I mean, do they have a flag? Again, we've got to find out.
Another caller.
Yeah, Toby, and Hayley, jump in, please, because I'm reading his book, so I've got all these questions. I don't want. Well, Toby, when I was reading your book, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but the word prophet came up in my mind for you. And so I thought, well, I'm going to look it up, see what the dictionary says about prophet. And the basic definition was messenger of God, that the person who is basically speaking for the higher power, if one embraces such a thought. Are you comfortable being thought of as a prophet?
No.
Nothing like
but now I'll tell you why. And it just came up 2 weeks ago. I'm in a men's spirituality group based in San Antonio, but we meet on Zoom. And the other day we were doing every other week is scripture, is Bible study. Well, I'm a little odd. I find it, I'm the heretic in this group and challenge everything they talk about. But one of the stories, and I forgot the name of the prophet, Joel, it's one of the minor prophets, says at one point, I am not a prophet nor son of prophets. The words were, no Nabi am I nor son of Nabi. And back in novitiate, when I was with the Society of Mary, that happened to be one of the chapters that I wrote a little term paper on. We wrote term papers on different books of the Bible. And so this thing about so I learned that at that time there was there were professional prophets, and they were called Nabi, N-A-B-I. And they were sort of like our professional tarot readers or horoscopes, all this stuff that we see on the internet, where people are selling their spiritual powers. And clearly all those things are real, but there's also something odd about making it into a business.
Yes. And
that thing about no Nabi am I nor son of Nabi has remained in my mind all my life, that I don't, and Campbell said that. Campbell said, I don't want to be a guru. I don't want followers or disciples. I'm a teacher.
Right.
And I think from my own good sense, it's much safer to not be a prophet, but to be a teacher or a writer and share things, I thank you for acknowledging that I quote lots of other people. One of the sort of missions that I've taken on, and this is because, for a while, 7 years, I edited a little zine called White Crane Journal. And the subject of White Crane Journal were gay men's spiritual experiences or spiritual insights. And I loved that I got to give other people voice. And I think that's so important that we support each other. I think one of the problems in the gay spiritual world is that each of us has kind of discovered our explanation for what God is and how our homosexuality fits into that. And so we've all got our little idea, and we want to keep teaching our idea. And it's important that we teach other people's ideas as well, because there's no one answer. The answer to all this is a library. There are lots of answers, lots of books.
Toby,
Hayley, go ahead.
Who is God to you? And when you think about sort of that higher power, and very much sticking in line with this idea of that, we have our beliefs, and then there's this huge trove of wisdom which has different flavors of it. So very much for you, who is God? What is God?
What is God? I'd probably say what. Although we, my main book, I've used this title 3 times on different books, The Myth of the Great Secret. I got into this at the California Institute studying Nagarjuna and the theory of shunyata in Buddhism, emptiness. Nagarjuna or Nagarjuna is sort of this, is thought of as the second Buddha. He lives around between 150 BC and 150 AD, so around the time of Jesus. He is the bridge between Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism is the popular religion which teaches compassion rather than being a monk. So anyway, Nagarjuna's big idea is emptiness. And what I came to understand emptiness to mean is that knowledge is empty of content because we just don't know enough to ask complete questions. The universe is so much bigger, and we are seeing that now in a physical way with astronomy, and discovering that those galaxies go out. I mean, it's just huge, and we're tiny. Well, that is also true at the level of mind and consciousness. In fact, maybe what all that stuff out there is a symbol in consciousness of what consciousness is. So God is this little metaphor that we have to point to something that is so big that we cannot possibly understand it because we just don't know enough. The same way, that 100 years ago, they didn't know about microprocessors, and 200 years ago, they didn't know about radio, and 500 years ago, they didn't know about machines. All of this stuff as we're evolving. So I think actually that the spiritual wisdom is that all of us are God. We're all part of consciousness, and God is a metaphor, a poem that is used to teach us how to be in touch with our own awareness of consciousness. And the point of all the myths, I think, is to produce spiritual experience. In the same way that if you have incense burning in the cathedral and those echoing sounds in the stained glass, the light coming through the stained glass windows, you feel spiritual. It changes your consciousness. So the myths, the stories that we tell about what it means to be human and to have thoughts inside here, believe the stories point to that going on, and they are like the incense. They make, if you think about those stories, they make you feel more enlarged, more enlightened, hopefully more compassionate and kind. I think that's the goal of all of this, is to be compassionate and kind, and participate in the process. I also think that God is the voice that you talk to in your head and it's talked back to you. And it's the part of you that is creating your experience. So it really is God that creates the universe, and the universe that God has created is this thing that I am in the middle of.
And Toby, what do you imagine happens when the body dies?
Well, yeah, I'll go back to Joseph Campbell about that, because I think that's an interesting one. He's asked about, does the ego live on? And his comment, and this is in the Moyers thing, I think, is something like, if you go to heaven and you see the face of God, you're not going to be thinking about who you used to be. So I kind of hope that as I am dying, if I can stay awake, perhaps I will experience my soul fading out, being dissolved into the great ocean of consciousness.
I've had people witness that happen when their partner died, that they actually saw the movement of the soul out of the body. And that was August Gold, whose name you may know.
Oh, yes.
Great spiritual teacher. When her partner died of cancer, she said she watched and saw it happen. So I don't believe in the ego. I believe in consciousness. And I don't know that means that if I have a next life, and I know you don't necessarily believe in the migration of the soul, but I'm not saying that I would remember that my mother this time around was Mary Virginia Day. I believe though that there's something when we see young children and say there's an old soul there, and that child wants to be around adults and wants to talk about adult things, that didn't happen in a vacuum. There's something going on there that we haven't been able to explain. So Hayley, do you see yourself as a prophet, minor or major?
No, I agree with Toby, teacher. I just, I feel prophets gurus are a very human lesson within life. And I think if we're focusing on the words prophets, gurus, we're kind of missing the point a little bit. We're getting sidetracked.
But if I mean, that's almost a wonderful description of somebody who is a prophet, is one who says, no, not me. I'm simply a teacher. I don't need it. I mean, I think that people, as Toby has talked about and Joseph Campbell talked about, we need images, we need mythology in order for us to explain.
And I think it's so wonderful that we're having this conversation, because I'm in a phase of questioning everything once again. And one of those things being rituals and this idea of, thinking that God is the be end and the end of everything. How real is that, and how much of that is very much aligned to us being true to the purpose of life and whatever that might mean. I think rituals are really important. I think these texts that speak to the human experience, which are different but same, are really important, because it gives people hope. It gives them something in our human experience to relax into, and kind of let the ritual do the work, some of the work for you. Let the texts do some of the work for you. I think in our human experience, we really, really need that, because this stuff's exhausting. It's hard. We need, these little gifts that others have figured out help them along the way. And in them passing that along, it empowers it, makes it more powerful. and helps people just to have that moment of like, fine, you don't feel like doing this on your own, go sit in a church and just let the energy of the church elevate you.
Mm-hmm. I do believe that we keep passing things on, but that what we're doing is creating from all of these ripples, a larger and larger wave, and that wave is love, and that wave is God, and that what we're participating. Teilhard de Chardin talked about, movement forward with Christ as the center, but that everything is moving forward. That is the nature of evolution, and evolution is moved by love and blocked by fear.
Absolutely.
So, and we're surrounded by fear. But one of the things that I'm most excited about in meeting Toby and in meeting, Bill Glenn, who was also on our show, and other people that we're interviewing and having joined our conversation, is that it's happening everywhere, but we're not an organized religion, right? Toby, when I read your book, and you're citing these other people, that just keeps saying to me, wow, Toby is great. I mean, I sent Toby my columns, and he's going to help me, figure out how to publish on being gay and gray. But after reading his book, Gay Perspective, I thought, not once did Toby say to me, hey, this is plagiarism, I wrote that, but I never read Toby's books, before. So reading them now says to me, all of these experiences and thoughts that I've had are being affirmed by these other gay men who are saying the same thing. And there's great joy in that, not embarrassment, but joy.
And I think it's when we talk about evolving and moving forward, it is this new way that we're creating, where it's an openness, it's a discussion, we're all talking about very similar things. Our experience with it may be unique, and that makes it a little bit different. But in being able to have these sort of very unorganized collections of people in different parts of the world really creates this new way of, there is no one way. Mm-hmm. Even though there is, the idea of one mental, one all that created all of this, how we experience it is in multitudes. Mm-hmm. And I think, it is love. Love is being able to have the humility to say, there's my way. And if there's my way, there must be other people's ways too.
Right. Eric Fromm writing about, the art of loving, and talking about, that was one of the more powerful books in my journey, helping me realize that there's so many different kinds of love. And he warned that those of you who fall in love, and there's all this wonderful, warm, fuzzy, sexually charged feeling, and they wane, and you think, oh, I made a mistake. I'm not with the right person. Wrong? Yeah. Well, guess what? You've just opened a new door to go to a new level, of experiencing love in a new way. And so, Hayley, in my mind, what you're saying is all of us are having these experiences of love in our own way. Right?
And I think let's celebrate it, for heaven's sake.
Right. Instead of fighting about it.
Yeah, and arguing it and trying to say that there's one way. Toby, in your, I would love to speak to you forever, but trying to keep it centered for today. In your experience and where you are in your life, where are you with love? Have you found one definition of love, or do you feel like even now it still keeps sort of changing?
Well, in terms of love life, is this normally, I've been with my partner for 37 years. We have been, I live in Austin, Texas. Kip and I ran the gay and lesbian bookstore here back in the late 80s and early 90s. And we're a very visible couple. We were invited to participate in a ZAP of applying for marriage licenses back in 1991, and got on CBS News, and we're sort of, the couple in Austin, the male couple. There was also a female couple. Then Austin had a domestic partnership registration, and we were invited to be the first domestic partners male domestic partners. So, you know, one of my real, I feel like one of my roles in life is to model good relationship. And Kip and I try to be role models. I don't know that as I say it, that sounds so prissy or something, but I do agree with you that, and what Brian said about love changing as we grow. The romance of first meeting is very different from the kind of hugging and cuddling and loving now that is much less sexual, or at least performative, but is emotional, and emotion and deep commitment and involvement and realizing the other. You know, what one of my notions is that to the extent that what I am is really God experiencing the universe from this particular perspective, this point of view, and I'm creating everything around me. That is, God is creating everything around me to reveal God's self to God. Mm-hmm. Then my partner loving me is how I show my love to God, and God shows his love to me in Kip loving me. So that it is our human, we experience God in our life as our life. I've had one great mystical experience in my life, and it sort of founded everything else. And in my meditation, I very frequently try to go back to it. And it was this moment of thinking, oh, everything that's happening to me is God molding me. And then, oh no, it isn't God molding me, it is the face of God that I'm seeing. Everything at this moment, whatever it is the face of God. So I very much, in that sense, I very much believe in God as the experience in the mind, and that what religion is about, life is about, is kind of this religious experience of realizing that we're something so much bigger than these little people that we think we are. And that's why we are all part of each other. You know, can I tell a quick story? I want to say something about Secret Matter just for a minute, because I started off here about the movie. This is what the book looks like. I've had so many different covers. One of the story, and I'm going to just give away all the secrets, but it's a sci-fi novel, and then as you get into it, the various secrets of what the aliens are revealed. Anyway, but the gimmick of the story quickly is that aliens show up. It turns out we discovered that they're not really aliens. They are human beings who live in an alternative universe. And a particular device that the United States Army has developed ends up causing their world and ours to collide when this machine is turned on, and it causes explosions in their world, and it causes earthquakes in ours, but our scientists haven't really realized that they're causing the earthquakes. And the story begins with the great earthquake in San Francisco, and the aliens want to come to San Francisco, and they show up soon after the earthquake, and they've got a warning, stop this technology. But they have a secret, and they are afraid of telling the secret because they've learned that human beings don't approve of homosexuality. And in their culture, they are mostly gay because their females ovulate during orgasm. So anytime male and female has sex, they'll have a child. if that were the case, then you can't be continuously heterosexual. And heterosexual intercourse becomes a religious sacrament, which passes life on, and they live in homosexual and lesbian, homosexual relationships, raising children, which they have during these religious rituals. The thing about them is that they change color according to their emotions. In our mythology, their auras show in their skin color. So they're like chameleons. And they can't lie because they turn color. They get muddy, dark black looking when they lie. So they would give themselves away so they don't lie. So they live in a culture in which there are no lies, and they don't understand the notion of lying. And they come to Earth and discover, well, they need to lie in order to get those Earth people to believe them. And the heroes is a lovely little gay romance in here between an Earth guy and a alien guy who discover one another. And it's because they love one another that they struggle to solve this problem. And, you know, I mean, that's how the hero goes. You've got to have a hero that does something that changes the plot. So then the punchline of the novel is that there's a fundamentalist religious guy who is sort of the enemy for a while. And he has managed to get across to the aliens world where everything is perfect, you know, and he hears their and he goes to one of these services in which they have this sexual as the sacrament, and he hears their reading of their creation myth. And when they read the story of the creation of human beings in the garden, they decide that God's right and they don't eat the apple. And so they don't experience the duality of good and evil because they always tell the truth. So my hypothesis, the myth, my little gay myth in the story, is that we're gay because we didn't eat the apple. And therefore we are still living in Eden. And if you understand it right, homosexuality is the way back into the garden. So, you know, a myth, a story, but a very nice way to say something about living without all this duality of male and female. You know, straight people experience so much conflict because men don't understand women and women don't understand men. And they love each other, but hate each other. And there's all this conflict, and all the humor in society is about the conflict between men and women and the old battle axe and ball and chain and all that stuff. Gay people generally don't talk about our lovers that way. Now, I mean, obviously some do because we live in the culture in which that's funny, but I think that the answer to all this homosexual oppression is for us to realize that because of our gayness, we're in paradise. And we need to recognize in paradise.
Yeah. And you know, you're saying this at the same time the Taliban has announced that when they complete the takeover of Afghanistan, they're going to execute all homosexuals. I mean, it's so hard to get the message out of joy. You know, once upon a time, two gay men fell in love and they lived happily ever after. I mean, that storyline, you know, we're just now beginning to tell it. Ray and I watched a movie last night called, I think, The Dance of the 41. It was about, yeah, it's beautifully done, but very painful because, you know, these men who have found each other and party together and have such joy get discovered and then die. And that's always the end of these older, you know, shows, is that, you know, homosexuality eventually is going to get discovered and you're going to pay for it. And you know, my life has been about, and Toby, so much of what you're doing is trying to communicate to people that no, that's not the ending. You know, the ending is, and he lived happily ever after, and he loves being who he is, not as a second choice. It's not a preference, but if it was, I'd choose it.
Yeah.
I wanted to give my perspective there as a straight person, is that I think in the media that we're seeing today, and there's a difference between obviously the news and what's going on in the world, but especially in the shows, that the media that we watch and we read, there are very few happy endings, regardless of whoever the hero is. Very rarely does two people find love and love wins, because we're in a conscious society right now where love is not dramatic enough. We need the drama. We need these terrible stories for people to now suddenly be engaged. So it's like I hear you and I can be with you as you're telling a story, and immediately I'm like, but wait, that's my world too. Like, I hate watching TV because I hate that there's no happy endings. Just when people find love, one of them dies, or you find out that it's not real, it's just an illusion. It's just like, why can't we just have a happy ending, everybody? Whether you're straight or whether you choose to go off on your own, can't you just be happy? Can't we just have love?
It's a choice. Ray and I had a good discussion this morning and about, we create our own happiness and we create our own storylines.
Yeah.
And there are things that influence us, like COVID. Our doctor up north, when we were up there in July, said everyone she's seeing is depressed. Everyone she's seeing is anxious. And so, we have to add that to our, our story right now in terms of understanding ourselves, our behavior, and our moods, but also helping others understand why we're feeling the way that we're feeling.
You mentioned the Taliban, Brian. I wanted to reflect on that. That it's so ironic that Islam has got this fundamentalist side that ends up so cruel in the name of God, and it's very much from belief in God. At the same time, Islam has this wonderful tradition of Sufism, in which we are all God. Sufism is sort of this notion I've been talking about. All of that is in the Sufi mystics, and lots of homosexuality and
Fluidity.
And fluidity, yes. One of the great joys of my life when I lived in San Francisco, I lived in San Francisco from 70 to 81. And the last 5 or 6 years, I went to Sufi dance class every other Monday. And did this wonderful, there's these things, the dances of universal peace that were taught by this gay teacher, Sam Lewis, who was taught by his experience was taught these dances by the Blessed Virgin Mary, who appeared to him, and he's mixed up Christianity and Zen and Islam and all together, and in the name of Sufism, and it's all very Sufi. And we did these wonderful little spinning dances, like you see the Sufi dervishes do.
Yeah.
Whirling dervish.
Neat, very neat stuff to do, and a way of generating spiritual experience, like belief. It's a way to change your mind.
And I've studied Sufism for many, many years, and it's been a joy. It's been a joy, and I've had a couple Sufi teachers, and it's to this day, Sufism is one of my most comfortable ways of learning. And I think, to your point, when it all started, and when we look at these ancient ways of living, and when they first started writing books or writing on papyrus, there wasn't this thing about it had to be a woman or it had to be a man. It was just love. Just be in the moment and just be in joy and see each other equally. See the God in the other person.
Yes, God is love.
God
That's
is love.
So
And
there, so
hopefully
if
we're
love,
going there.
so if love exists, and we all affirm that it does from our own experiences, if then God exists. I mean, there's, if God is love, love is God, and then that ends the question of whether or not there is a God,
I
right?
agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the fact that us three are sitting here talking, we are God.
I agree with you. I think we're manifesting God.
Mm-hmm.
We're manifesting love.
and that is somewhat different from the Orthodox religious notion of what God is,
Yeah.
as this separate being that can never interact because it's divine substance and we are human substance. And
we are almost out of time, but I wanted perhaps one last question would be to both of you. Is the hero's journey removing that separation and coming back to, rather than seeing God as something out there and above, is the hero's journey coming to the place where you acknowledge yourself that I am God, I am that I am?
Well, yes, let me say, one of my teachings as a prophet is, Campbell observes that you can understand religion from over and above. And when you get outside of, when you believe in all the gods, all the religions instead of just one, you discover that it's about something bigger. And it's about something that's bigger, but probably can't be put into words very well. And it's a secret because there's just more than we can possibly know. But it's looking from over and above. I think a major part of the gay experience is learning to see other people's behavior, to see life from outside, from over and above. As children, we have to learn to kind of be secret, to be selective about what we admit we're experiencing, because other people won't resonate with it. And we learn that we're experiencing things that other people aren't experiencing. So we learn to see as an outsider. Mm-hmm. So that seeing as an outsider that goes with being gay parallels the seeing as an outsider that goes with rising to a higher level understanding of religion. What Buddhism, I think, would call enlightenment. And that's what the Buddhist enlightenment is about, is seeing beyond what we see around us. Mm-hmm. And so gay people have got this potential. Not all of us do it. Some of us do. The fact that the three of us are here talking about it demonstrates that it's happening in the same way that we prove that the fact that we love proves that God exists. The fact that we talk about this demonstrates that God is this bigger being, not a chintzy little guy who wants to kill everybody that doesn't obey his rules. Mm-hmm.
I've never been afraid of God. When I talk about the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, I dropped the 7th one, fear of the Lord, because I've never, that's not a gift. I don't want to be afraid, and I've never been afraid of God. I've never thought that I was going to hell, ever. And even though I knew that I was attracted to Robert Conrad on Wild Wild West, I didn't think that I was going to hell. I just knew that I had a secret I better not tell anyone.
I think that's such a wonderful segue into another conversation, Brian, because you're raising 2 big points there. That sense of knowing from such an early on place that came solely from within. Mm-hmm. That's not what the hell is that about?
Yeah,
it's so interesting. And as you said, I've never been afraid of God. I don't think I've ever been afraid of God, but I've most certainly been angry at God.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a great topic for another conversation, but we are out of time today, gentlemen. It goes so quickly.
Yeah, Toby, if you are ever inclined to want to come back and talk again, we'd love to have you.
I can
we-
talk
we-
forever.
Yeah, well, that's what I was feeling. I think we've just, there's so much more that we can talk about. So let's schedule another visit if that
Absolutely,
works.
I'd love it.
Yeah,
Please, yes.
that'd be
Thank
great.
Okay, well, this has
much.
been just a delight this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Brian, too, for
Thank-
making my Thursday
yes.
a delight. And may we go forth and be love.
Yes.
Lots of love to you.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.